Come, let us explore atheist spirituality. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. Oops, I forgot to cut and paste the question. Don't I feel silly? Let's do that right now. Please bear with me. Let's see. I'm going to push this button, and I'm going over. Well, that's a fine kettle of fish. Un momento, por favor. Okay, here we go. So, all right, the question begins with the title, Spirituality Book Recommendations for Atheists. In the words of David Letterman, we're having some fun now, eh, kids? Okay, here we go. Cowabunga. Okay, here we go. So, take it from the top as if I was a competent fellow. Spirituality book recommendations for atheists. It could be books discussing secular humanism, secular Buddhism, and other topics that might help non-religious people struggling with alienation find life more meaningful. I want to foster personal growth. Fabulous. It's easier to foster personal growth than it is to foster a puppy. There's much less piddling involved. Usually. So let's begin with a bit of the old broad brushstrokes, shall we? It's all about primate spirituality. It has been observed by anthropologists that genetically speaking, chimpanzees and bonobos are remarkably similar. They have a relatively recent common ancestor. Behaviorally, the difference between chimpanzees are simple. Chimpanzees are psychotic bastards and bonobos are fairly groovy. But don't take my word for it. Let's break it on down. Chimpanzees tend to be rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, competitive, and cruel. Whereas bonobos tend to be flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. I want to be more like a bonobo. They're far more groovy than chimpanzees. What's the difference? Well, circumstantially, the chimpanzees live in relative scarcity and peril, whereas bonobos live in relative abundance and safety. But how does that affect our brains? Glad you asked. This is an artist's take on one slice of a human brain as seen from the side, this being the forehead, this being the mouth. Consider, if you will, this bad boy right here that functions as the seat of both our aggression and our anxiety, and is described as the amygdala, located in the metaphoric dungeon of our limbic system. Its proximity to the brainstem infers that this is one of the oldest, evolutionarily speaking, one of the oldest parts of our brain, and it makes perfect sense. From a survival point of view, we want to know when it's time to kick ass or haul ass. Kick ass or haul ass. There's a symmetry there, if you ask me. So, and that's useful from a survival point of view. That's useful, but we have more than one reward system dwelling at the bottom of our brain. Yes, we have a Mr. Hyde-like dopamine-oriented reward system, who has kind of like the Tasmanian Devil in a Bugs Bunny cartoon voiced by Mel Blanc. Was that it? It's all about procreation and everything that supports procreation. Drinking when you're thirsty, eating when you're hungry, sleeping when you're tired, finding warmth when you're cold, finding cool when you're warm, that type of stuff. And so it rewards. It's all about making sure we procreate. It doesn't care if we blow up our lives with promiscuity. It doesn't care if we blow up our lives with cruelty. As long as we are humping and spreading our seed, it's a happy camper. But we have a secondary reward system that is oxytocin-oriented, that has evolved to reward for cooperation with an experience, not of pleasure from dopamine, but of fulfillment. Now, I don't know if you're as big a geek as me, and if you've ever seen Dark Crystal, but we don't want to be like the Skanksies, who are just so worried about survival that they've lost all their humanity. And we don't want to be like the opposite of the Skanksies. Sorry, I forgot their name. Who are so worried about being awesome human beings that they forget to survive. In fact, that was wonderfully illustrated in the Joss Whedon movie Serenity. If you ever get a chance to see that, I recommend it. So we have both. We have this dopamine-oriented reward system, which pricks of us all, regardless of gender. And we have an oxytocin-oriented reward system, which makes humanitarians of us given half a chance. Or to put it more simply, I want to be less of a chimp and more of a bonobo, because they're groovy. How do we do that? Now that we've decided what our outcome is, and we've decided that, we're looking at it as a primatologist would, how do we do that? How do we get there from here? Simple. First, I'm going to show you what doesn't work, and then I'm going to show you what works. Why am I doing that? Well, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and it creates more problems than it solves. For instance, perhaps you've read self-help books that sing the praises of active concentration and active analysis. Well, here's the deal. The only way we can perform either, no less both of those actions, is to utilize neurological structures such as our medial prefrontal cortex or our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Please forgive the clunky nature of this illustration that I'm using. So the prefrontal cortex is awesome if you want to sort or contrast or compare or do math or edit literature. It is fabulous. However, speak to a personal trainer, they will tell you concentration curls are dandy. But if you overwork the bicep, you don't get enough time to rest, first you're going to exhaust it. then you're going to injure it temporarily, then you're going to injure it long term. And no one wants that. No one says, what I want is to wear unflattering spandex, pay an ungodly amount of money so I can maim myself. No one wants that at all, not even a little bit. Similarly, with our beautiful, squishy brains, we want to use them in a sustainable way. But what happens if we're idiots? Because we've all been idiots. It can't just be me. What happens if we're idiots and we emphasize one area of brain and we neglect other areas of our brain? What could happen? In the short term, fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging studies, have shown that when we overuse our prefrontal cortex, our amygdala lights up, our inner chimpanzee, the seat of aggression and anxiety. Think of a screaming chimpanzee throwing feces. Okay. And feces throwing is the least of the concerns. Chimpanzees will literally tear off your face. It's been adults, humans, attacked by pairs of chimpanzees have lived but been horribly disfigured, like a Hannibal Lecter victim. So, yeah, that's our inner chimpanzee. But it gets worse. If we ignore the warning signs, like a boy who's just discovered his willy in junior high and is determined to chafe himself into his next life, then we can, if we continue to abuse our prefrontal cortex, we can begin to present with symptoms of depression. I don't know about you, but I have no hunger for rage or terror or despair. I want the grooviness. How about you? So now that we've found the path to the dump, let's find the path to the Emerald City, shall we? Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we access our sympathetic nervous system, which is ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord. Some would call it the thoracic region. It has evolved to support perception in a manner that is vulnerable, passive, visceral, and random. Already that sounds less chimp-like and more groovy, bonobo-like. But there is a price. We are wired to notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. We are also wired to notice emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. We are not digital, we are analog, and therefore capable of perceiving spectrums. Everything from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Now, that could feel overwhelming. Fortunately, nature's got our back, because every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within the lower and upper thirds of our spinal cord, also known as our lumbar and cervical regions. It has evolved to support both our physical relaxation as well as our mental release. So, as a fringe benefit of cooperating. Well, I think I skipped a step. So how do we cooperate with this? Because let's face it, we're all born with the two facets of our autonomic nervous system, and yet so many times we've squandered our lives acting like chimpanzees. So there's a disconnect. What's going on? And a word, Urkel. The three-ring shit show of our brain often acts like Urkel. Clever? Yes. Klutzy? Hell yes. Our brain is forever knocking shit over and going, did I do that? So how do we get our Urkel to be less spazzy and more cool? Simple. Here's how. Through the power of intention. Words guide intention. It's the damnedest thing. So here's the funny thing. During our inhalation, when we silently, mentally, and passively recite, I've got a sneeze that's sneaking up on me. Yes, grizzly, is it not? So, during our inhalation, when we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this, something weird happens. The three-ring shit show of a brain begins to actively cooperate with our sympathetic nervous system. But wait, there's more. During our exhalation, when we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease, our brain begins to cooperate with our parasympathetic nervous system. And then weird things happen. If we are wired up to an fMRI machine, we will notice number one, our amygdala calms the fuck down. And number two, this thing lights up. This squishy thing that looks kind of like a baseball mitt. This thing that kind of looks, well, that's known as the anterior cingulate gyrus. I like to refer to it as our inner bonobo, for it functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and compassion and love. So, chimpanzee, bonobo. We access our bonobo effortlessly and automatically simply by aligning our intention, our volition, if you want to be all fancy pants, with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems via the thresholds of inhalation and exhalation. So remember, we're talking about practicing vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. That precludes the controlling tendencies of practicing breathing exercises, where we actively choose how deep or shallow or long or short our breathing is. No, we're going to leave our breathing to the medulla oblongata. It's been doing a fairly good job all these years. Wouldn't you agree? So we're just going to breathe on autopilot. We're simply aligning our intention through the cunning use of self-talk. And doing so, we experience a physiological shift. There is a phenomena which has been run amok with on Medicine Avenue, and you've probably heard it. Neuroplasticity. No, that does not mean that our brain is designed by Whammo or Parker Brothers. It does mean that the more we do something, the more robust the neural pathways that support that thing become. The more we sit in meditation, the better we get at it. So, the first week, you could sit for 5 minutes, setting a timer on your smartphone, every 12 hours or so. If you enjoy it, perhaps the second week you could bump that up to 10 minutes. Perhaps the third week you could bump that up to 15 minutes. By the conclusion of the 12th week, you could grow comfortable with sitting for 60 minutes twice a day. And because you've progressed gradually, it is more sustainable for your body and your emotions and your mind, and also the body and emotions and mind of those you dwell with, be they pets, or partners, or children, and those with whom you work, because you're progressing gradually and gently. It's easier to live with you, basically. There's a wonderful word that eludes me this week. It might come back to me later on. But we don't want to become like an enthusiastic Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. So, there we go. Now, let's return to the brain. Not all of us are neurotypical. Some of us, about 15% of us, are neurodivergent. A portion of those either have ADHD or ADHD and have difficulty managing our dopamine, which can make us slaves to boredom, to the pendulum of boredom and impulsivity. I got your back. What we're going to do this morning is alternate between gentle, passive contemplations and then the practice of meditation. Because we're going to go back and forth, it's going to give us just the splash of dopamine we need to keep from turning this into a torture test of boredom. So let's see. Well, I'd like to do this with you after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping because YouTube. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent more than 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of spirituality so that you won't have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. There you go. You've tolerated the 30 seconds of boredom. Bravo. So, let's play with the latest iteration of the practice text known as Love, Mindfulness, Meditation, and the Three Marks of Reality, which kind of sounds like an act you might have seen on or your parents might have seen on the Ed Sullivan Show. So let us bring the mental into the path of love, mindfulness, meditation, and the three marks of existence. We're beginning with the mental. So please, you're welcome to chant with me. There's nothing superstitious here. We're just setting intention. Each of us has experienced the stress of not getting our mental needs met. How we want what we want for as long as we want, if at all. Now, I think this is going to be more pleasing to the eye if I move that there and add a space there. Now it's pretty. So, in Southeast Asia, according to ancient Southeast Asian iconography, certain conical structures have come to symbolize enlightened mind. And so, because we have evolved to think symbolically, I'm using that image. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all these words and reduce them, just like we're a chef. We're going to create a reduction. And we're reducing all these words into just 6 syllables, which we're going to divide into these silent, mental, passive recitations of our inhalation and our exhalation. Of course, do remember that these are rhetorical questions. Why contemplate this? Number one, it helps us to sidestep the self-accusation that if we've experienced stress, there's something wrong with us, or that it's some sort of an indictment. Number two, exploring the idea of stress sows the seeds of empathy. Together. Since we are not alone in our frustrations, we could also long that others' mental needs also be met. So we're already wired to want our needs met. And be due to the magic of our mirror neurons, it isn't very difficult to begin to want others' needs to be met too, especially if we pretend that happiness is not a zero-sum game. So we're wishing joyful minds for all beings. There's nothing magic here. We're not concentrating or visualizing or believing. We're just using words to play with our intention. Again with the chanting. Observing the coming and going of mental phenomena. Help us to see that ever-changing one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. There's nothing mysterious about impermanence. We've seen it our whole life. With the coming and going of the seasons, we see the impermanence of a year. With the waxing and the waning of the moon, we see the impermanence of a month. With the rising and the setting of the sun, we see the impermanence of a day. And right now, we can gingerly rest our fingertips upon our upper chest. As we breathe in, we can feel it swell. As we exhale, we can feel it sink. And thus viscerally experience the impermanence of a breath. Change makes of grasping an absurdity. Notice how we're not dealing with beliefs or dogma, just ideas and gentle rhetorical questions. We come to our fourth and final pre-meditation contemplation together. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever mental phenomena we notice during our previous inhalation could feel less like our identity, as if it simply did not define us. That's it. Mystery solved. So we're not trying to believe or disbelieve in an existential self. We're just playing with words in an effort to be less tied up in knots. Originally, the idea of not-self was never designed to be a pseudo-intellectual Rubik's Cube. It was always meant to be a figure of speech. Before we continue with our meditation, allow me to remind you that together as a team, we could meditate as at last. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and release, just like we explored during the opening instructions. So, what I like to do is during the inhalation, advance the tip of, so I'm going to count right now 16 rounds. And I'd like to count 16 rounds, assuming a round is just one inhalation followed by one exhalation. During the inhalation, I like to advance the tip of my right thumb upon the creases and tip of my fingers. So let's practice together. Just as we can count 16 rounds on our right hand, on our left hand we can keep track of sets of 16 rounds. So we just counted our first set of 16 rounds, and now we can start our second set of 16 rounds. I like to call this Bengali crease counting because I was inspired to practice this by an ancient Bengali. I find it most ergonomically sound to rest my hands in my lap when I do this. I also find it ergonomically sound to allow my head and hips to enjoy a vertical traction as I breathe in, and for that vertical traction to relax as I breathe out. Remember, we're going to experience all sorts of things. In addition to perceptions, we're going to experience emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. We're not shopping for peanut butter, even though commercials taught us that choosy moms choose Jif. We're not shopping. We're not choosing what to experience. Imagine meditation is like a play. You and I are not the producer, nor the director, nor the playwright, nor even the thespian. We're just the bloke in the seats watching the shenanigans on the stage. And now for a bit of the old gentle contemplation. We are turning our attention now to the experience of the interpersonal, known in Pali as Vedana, known in the vernacular as the feels. So we began with the stress, and now we're bringing interpersonal stress into the path of loving kindness. We're now bringing our experience of the interpersonal into the path of impermanence. And now we bring our experience of the interpersonal into the path of not self. One moment, please. And now, let us take a break from meditation for some gentle, passive contemplation, that we might experience a splash of the old dopamine. Our focus is going to be the physical. We are working with the four bases of mindfulness. We've already worked with the mental and the interpersonal. Now we're turning our attention to the physical. So if you've just joined us, well, I'm not sure. Anyway, let's just move on silently and play with the idea of bringing the experience of the physical, bringing the physical into the experience of stress. Contemplating this helps to lay the foundation of empathy and helps us to be a little bit less neurotic about the stress in our lives. Let us lovingly wish that each being experience beautiful health. Now let us explore the inevitability of change, be it subtle or be it coarse. You might find that as you relax into your exhalation, whatever body you might have noticed during your previous inhalation could begin to feel less defining. That the number on the scale or the silhouette of our abdomen in the mirror could feel like it defines us less and less and less. Having enjoyed our contemplation break, let's return to a meditation. As we inhale and silently, as well as silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this, we can kick back and watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. While we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. I'll be right back. For our final set of contemplations, let's turn our attention to the circumstantial, beginning by bringing the circumstantial into the path of stress. Let us bring the circumstantial into the path of love. Let us bring the circumstantial into the path of impermanence. Let us bring the circumstantial into the path of selflessness. And let us return to awareness and release. Let us seal this morning's practice by chanting loving wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. These wishes are not prayers to a real or imagined celestial entity. They're just exercising our loving intention in harmony with the four bases of mindfulness. May all minds clear yet impermanent be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind. May all relationships resounding yet impermanent be as loving as a Buddha's speech. May all bodies sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Deva's form. May all circumstances appearing it impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Devi's land. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead to today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.